So I'd like to introduce you to today's presenter, Professor Peter Hawkins. Many of you will know Peter already as a colleague and as a leader in the field of consulting, working internationally with top companies on major change projects and coaching top teams. He is also, of course, Professor at Henley Business School, President of the Academy of Executive Coaching, thought leader and author. And his most recent books, Leadership Team Coaching and Leadership Team Coaching in Practice, are very excellent resources for all of us team coaches. And they do also address in those books issues around purpose-led teams and organisations. And speaking personally, my experience of Peter is that he does very much represent the spirit of purpose-led organisations in all of his work. So Peter, it's a pleasure as always to have you here with us today. And now I'd like to turn the session over to you.
So thanks a lot, Margaret, and welcome everybody. And good morning to all our friends in Europe and Africa, and good afternoon to anybody who's joined us from Asia. And I hope friends who've managed to get up early in America are having a good breakfast. So it's a delight to be talking to you about this subject today. So welcome to all of you. Before we get, excuse my crackly voice, before we get underway, can I just ask each of you to think of a time in your life when you felt fully engaged with whatever task you were doing, when you felt highly motivated, you felt all of you was being involved. Not just your mind, but your feelings, your heart, your body, and you felt really connected to the work. What was happening? When you felt that other people were also engaging with you in what you were doing, and there was that sense of real connection and real passion. And what was it? What was the purpose that was creating that passion and that connection within you? If I think back for myself to one of my most engaged consulting engagements, was when I was working in South Africa. It was just after the times of the political change, and I was working with the fruit industry. I was working with the merger between Outspan and Cape Fruit, the two big marketing entities that were taking fruit from South Africa to all the major consumer places in the world. And what gave me a real passion about the work was that I knew that 2.5 million people in South Africa were dependent upon the fruit industry out of a population of 44 million. I realized that the fruit industry was the main prop of rural sustainability for South Africa. I realized if we did not get the fruit industry, which was mightily challenged at that time, to integrated, working well, rural sustainability would become problematic within that country, and many people would start to move to the towns and the townships and would have major urban problems. I knew that what I did with those top teams and with those organizations really mattered. The future and many stakeholders needed me to step up. And I think that's where purpose-led work becomes really important, where we have to find that the world is requiring us to be more than we currently are, where the world and the future is asking us to really commit to what we're doing. So hopefully you've all thought of a time in your life, because today we're going to be looking at how do we get purpose not only in our individual life, but how do we get purpose in our team, and how do we get it in our organizations? So let me just start with a slide that those of you who've been taught by me in the past will be very used to. It's a formula that came from Reg Revens, the founder of Action Learning. If learning isn't greater than the rate the environment is changing, the organization is on the Darwinian road to extinction. Arguably, the only competitive advantage for every organization today is that we can learn faster than our business ecosystem is changing. We can learn faster than competitors. If today, I want to say, if your organization is not making a positive difference to the future, it has no future. What every company has to do to be successful is discover what it can do that the world of tomorrow is needing. When I was first working with major organizations and top teams back in the 1980s and 1990s, very much the work we were doing was helping them develop a clear mission and a vision. And when I look back now, that work of the 1990s, which was all about mission, vision, values, was all very agentic. It was about our ambition. Where do we want to take the organization? And when I look back now, I realize that I was working on an assumption that the top teams went away to expensive hotels and they dreamt up missions and visions. Now I realize it's not the top team that creates the mission, it's the mission or the purpose that creates the top teams. And that's why I think as we've gone into the 21st century, the language has started to change from being mission and vision driven to being purpose driven. You see, the purpose is already out there in the world, waiting for an organization, waiting for a top team to recognize the need and find a way of responding. The purpose may come from the changing needs of your customers, or indeed your customer's customer. It may come from a changing need within the communities in which you're operating, or the changing needs of your employees or your investors. But actually, purpose is not coming from your personal dream, it's coming from future back and outside in needs that you start to step up to. When I teach leadership, I often say that leadership begins when we recognize there's something that it desperately needs doing, and we can't find anyone else to take the lead on it. So we decide we have to step up. So what's company purpose? If a mission captures the company's ambition, and the vision shows what it will be like when success is achieved, the purpose defines who the company serves and the value it creates for them. And if you look on the right, Gallup is saying, look, actually, it's the purpose that actually connects our brand, our desired culture, our way of operating, what really matters to us. It's something that doesn't just speak to the head. It's not a target, an ambition. It's something that also speaks to the heart and gives us the raison d'etre, what gets us up in the morning, what gets us to work, and what gets us to work together. So let's look at the head level. What's the case for purpose? There are several things that purpose in a company delivers. You'll see from the top, there's lots of data now, not just this one, which says that more and more, particularly millennial employees, are wanting and attracted to not the company that pays them the most, but the company that helps them learn and grow, and a company that's doing something they can identify with. If we attract in the war for talent the best employees, we need to have a galvanizing purpose. We also know that it makes a really big difference to the brand of an organization. Clients want to work with organizations making a difference, whether that's through fair trade or because of their commitment to the environment. We want to identify with people who have the same values as us. We also look at there's growing evidence that purpose-led firms actually deliver better returns to their investors. and there's a big growth in ethical investment. Also, we know a great article in 2011 by Michael Porter, where he realized that all the work he'd been doing on strategy for many years was about creating shareholder value, but that to be a sustainable business, a sustainable enterprise, we need to create shared value, not just for our investors, but for our customers, for our employees, for our partner organizations, for the environment, for the communities where we operate. And finally, right at the bottom, this whole issue where if you look at the Edelman barometer on trust and trust of leaders and business, this is becoming a critical issue. Because it takes years to build a company reputation. But with viral social media, a company's reputation can be broken within seconds as news about something you've done goes viral. And what we know now is that the difference is you can make a mistake as a company, but if you haven't got a track record of making a positive difference and being value-led, you won't recover from the viral social media negativity. So what are the outcomes of a purpose? Well, one is that the purpose unites us. It gives us a sense of shared meaning. What makes our work meaningful? So to go back to my South African story, what really mattered there was not just that we were producing great fruit, we were managing to sell it to supermarket chains throughout the world, but that we were providing a meaningful livelihood for 2.5 million people across South Africa, and providing something that was meaningful for the rural communities in various parts of that country that was going through transformation. That attracts and energizes employees. That as you'll see in the top over there, it aligns our company strategy with what at the head level, with what matters at the heart level. It inspires people to be at their best. It's something they care about, which they want to be committed to and step up to. The other thing is about purpose. I wrote a blog just before my 40th wedding anniversary, and that's not irrelevant, which was entitled "Partnerships Are Not Created by Partners." At that time, I was working through GP Strategies with a major financial merger in Scotland. And they were talking about how do we bring the best of both together? And I said, look, you're starting with the wrong frame. Because if we talk about a merger being about the best of both, we'll have long arguments about who has the best IT systems, who has the best investment managers, who has the best customer relationships. What we should be talking about is what is it we could do together that we couldn't do by working in parallel and neither of us could do by ourselves? What is it that the world of investment management tomorrow needs that we can give birth to together that neither of us could have achieved by ourselves? It's the purpose that creates the partnership. And yet most mergers, most public sector mergers between or partnerships between health and social care or housing and local government, they don't start with that important question. What is it we can do together that we cannot do apart, that the world of tomorrow needs from us? And that final one, it provides this galvanizing attractor for aligning culture, leadership, and strategy. So it provides something that links various elements often worked on by different parts of the organization. So let's look at just some very top lines of companies' purposes. And if you've got a piece of paper, let me invite you to do a quick quiz. Could you name any of those organizations? Who do you think they are? Who said bring the world closer together? Who said we create happiness by providing the best in entertainment for people of all ages everywhere? Who said to be the world's most customer-centric company? Sort of place where people can come to find and discover anything they might want to buy online. Who said to organize the world's information and make it universally available and useful? Who said to create a better everyday life for the many people? Who said our purpose is to inform, educate, and entertain? Who said to help people do more, feel better, and live longer? We said our corporate purpose states that to succeed requires the highest standards of corporate behavior towards everyone we work with, the communities we touch, and the environment on which we have an impact. Have you all managed, hopefully, to write down who you think those are? Somebody suggested that number 4 is Google. I got a few answers already coming in the Q&A box, but let's see if you can, who's got the top score. So if we look at the next one, this is who they were. It was Facebook who said, bring the world closer together, and Disney, we create happiness by providing the best in entertainment. And yes, Paula Davidson, you were right. It was Google who said to organize the world's information and make it universally available and useful. This is something about focusing on it's not a target about how we sell more. It's not an ambition about reaching more people. It's about the difference we make for our customer. And what's important about this is to realize that to be successful in today's world, it's no longer good enough to have the 1990s mantra of being customer-centric. We have to focus on our customer's customer, our client's client, so that we can, if you like, partner with our customer to make a difference not only to their lives, but the lives of the people who are their stakeholders. And that means thinking beyond the usual targets, beyond the usual stakeholder analysis, to a way of linking purpose, partnership, and passion. So yes, just go back on that. Give yourself a score on how many of those you managed to, of those 8 did you manage to notice? And would your organization's purpose be recognizable by people in the world? Would they say, that must be Google, that must be IKEA? Because it's the brands that have really worked on their purpose that become memorable, because people remember them for the fact that they stand out as people who make more of a difference in that area than others do. So then just look at a quick comparison. Nike and Adidas, both well-known names in the whole area. You know, when I was young, we used to talk about plimsolls. They were a cheap form of shoe which poor children wore to school if they couldn't afford shoes. Little did we ever dream that they would become a fashion item that would sell for a lot of money, and that having a trainer would become an important consumer item. But Nike and Adidas are both in the area. So you see, Nike's purpose to bring inspiration and innovation to every athlete in the world, and then to say, if you have a body, you are an athlete. How do we make your life healthier? How do we help you achieve your goals? Not how do we sell you an item of footwear? And compare their success in doing that, in creating that partnership with their consumer, focusing on what the consumer wants to achieve in their lives, rather than Adidas, who are much more focused on selling a product. So a purpose needs to resonate with the company, but also resonate with the stakeholders. It needs to be unique and simple. It needs to have a long-term appeal and be action-orientated about the difference we can make together. And it needs to link and have a driving force behind our strategy, our leadership, and our culture. So the medium is the message, and as we often say, you know, today's world, you're having to strategize constantly, but unless you are shifting the culture of the organization, the strategy will never take root and grow. Whereas Peter Drucker said, culture will always eat your strategy for breakfast. And unfortunately, in many companies we go into, they call in McKinsey to deal with the strategy. They call in OD people to deal with culture, and they call in a business school to help them with their leadership. And they don't realize that the real challenge is, how do we get all three of those aligned? And purpose, a unifying purpose, plays an important part in unifying those three.
So Peter, you've talked a lot about this move from mission-driven to purpose-driven organisations. So just wondering if there's anything you'd like to add. And we did have a question about, do you think this trend is going to continue given what's going on in the world?
Yes. Let me deal with, will it continue? Because I think that there are two trends that, despite the pushback against them, will continue. One is globalization. Despite the kickback and some countries reverting to some forms of nationalism, globalization is driven not by politics, but it's driven by technology. We know that 2 billion more people are going to join the World Wide Web in the next 3 to 5 years. We know that we're going to become more globally interconnected. We know that the fourth industrial revolution will be something that isn't just driven by one mode of power, but integrates AI, biotechnology, nanotechnology, 3D printing, all of those coming together. And that growth of global interconnection will mean that more and more people will be looking for companies that are making a positive difference into a very complex and demanding world. And another reason I think this trend will continue is that, as I said before, with in terms of what something that delivers for the employees, that delivers for the customers, that delivers for the investors. I think more and more we're seeing people wanting organizations that make a difference on many fronts, and that gives some sort of alignment, which is one of the biggest challenges for organizations. And I don't know anything else that can more powerfully give alignment to organizations than a galvanizing purpose. So for those two reasons, I think, yes, it's going to continue and become more important rather than less. Were there any other questions, Margaret?
Yes, there were. One was from Chris Stevenson, stimulated, I think, by the example of Adidas. If the purpose is wrong, should it be changed?
Rather than thinking about a purpose being right or wrong, I think we should think about, is the purpose fit for purpose? If that's not a oxymoron, does the purpose do what we need it to do? Is it something that provides the alignment we need? Is it something that ignites the passion in our people, that gives us the connection to what matters to our customers, that provides the connection between our strategy, our leadership, and our culture? And that's where I think we should ask, is it right or wrong? But does it do that? And if it doesn't, then I think we have to, and I'll be saying in the second half, a little bit about how do you create a purpose, but also how do you recreate it? And as the world changes, then our purpose needs to change. So it's not forever. It will have to be modified and developed. But that's what we have to be constantly looking at.
So it needs to be quite a dynamic process by the sound of it.
Yeah, it certainly does.
And we did have one last question, which I found as though you're going to move on to anyway, which is very much around how do you actually get that purpose, and one that works for all the stakeholders.
Yeah, that's what I'll now move on to. Some of the methodologies for being purpose-led. And then at the end, I'll come back to looking at what some of the leading companies are doing, not only to be purpose-led within their own organization, but to join up purpose-led organizations around the world. So I take it from there, Margaret, and look at some of the methodology.
Hand it back to you.
Thanks, Margaret. So some of you will know that I developed over many years, and it's used by GP strategies in many parts of the world, the 5 disciplines of highly effective teams and of boards, in which I argued that for a team to be effective had to have a clear commission or why they did their work. They needed to come inside and look at and clarify what was their purpose, their objectives, their key result areas, their values, and then go into how does that mean they need to work differently together, and how do they connect with their stakeholders, and how do they become a learning team? Well, more recently, we've applied this to working with whole organizations and to being purpose-led. So for the organization, we need to start with what is it that our stakeholders have and need from us? How is that going to change if we look into the third horizon of the future? Have we got a clear why for our business? And then we have to come inside and take that clear why and turn it into and clarify, and I'll say a bit more about that later, a primary purpose statement. And we have a strategy for achieving that aligns what we're doing in terms of our internal working, how we're engaging with our stakeholders, how we're partnering with our customers, our investors, our partner organizations. And we have to turn that into some real clear outcome objectives, something that's measurable, OKRs, which are used in agile work with organizations. And it also needs to be not something that's just in our strategic objectives, but something that's in the values and the way we behave and be in the organization, and how we be and behave with all our stakeholders. Then we've got to take that into our culture, into the way we work together, and the way we come together in teams, between teams, and in the way we connect in our lived brand of how we connect with all our stakeholders. And that's something in the middle that we have to constantly be learning. How is the world out there changing? You know, people say to me often, well, we can't predict the future. But I say, look, what's going to be your future is probably already happening somewhere in the world. Where are the weak signals of the future already arriving? And how are we learning from those to adapt? How do we need to be to make a difference? And if we take each of those, the commissioning, the first step is we need to look at what are the people we serve? Who does our work serve? Now that all of you online could think about that both at your personal level, your team level, and your organizational level. Who does your work serve? And this is a kind of a cycle you can think through. Who are the people who have an investment in your work and are looking for some sort of return on their investment? That may be people further up the organization, it may be your shareholders, it may be the government. Who are the people who report to you or colleagues across the organization that need something from your work, your internal and external colleagues? Who are the customers, and who are the customer's customer, as I mentioned earlier? Who are the other organizations you work with and in partnership with? What are the communities you operate in? Like I mentioned the case of South Africa and rural sustainability being an important purpose. It wasn't from within the company, but was in the communities in which they operated. And what about the more than human environment, the ecology. What is it we take from there, and what do they need from our work? And if we put those all together, not as separate blocks, but as a virtuous cycle, what does that mean about the positive difference we need to make right around that cycle? And by the way, on the right, you'll see the 13th fairy. That comes from Grimm's fairy stories, and it's about who is a stakeholder we're not noticing. And that because we're not noticing, they'll come back and bite us in the bum, or from the Grimm's fairy story in Snow White, in Sleeping Beauty, will come and prick us in the thumb. So if that's about the commissioning, then we need to take that into a kind of clarity exercise. So here's a simple grid you can use. Who are the people we serve? You can list down there. What is it we enable them to do? Think back to Nike. Nike weren't talking about, we serve our customers, we sell them a product. We enable them to be athletes in their own lives. We enable their health. We enable their exercise. We enable their sense of well-being. I was recently working with an air traffic control for a major country. And in their first column, they listed that they serve airlines, airline customers. They serve airports, helping airports be efficient. They serve the Air Force and allowing the Air Force to provide defense of the company and make the country safe. They serve the government and the population. And in each of those, they listed what did they enable each of those organizations to do that they couldn't do without them. And therefore, they had to think about who was their their customer stakeholders. So we serve the government to make the people safe and provide an operable, well-rehearsed defense system. And so we're thinking right along the value chain. And once we've collected that, we could go back to our stakeholder. Let's go back to our stakeholder cycle and put together all the different value creation that we do for each of our stakeholders, and then to start to map the connections across that. And then say, what is it that connects all that different sort of stakeholder need and value creation? And one of the unifying bits about that is to be asking the question, in that particular cycle, what does that tell us about what we can uniquely do as an organization that the world of tomorrow needs, that will create shared value not only for us as an organization, but for all our stakeholders? What's our unique place in the world integrated ecosystem? What could we do better than anyone else because of our history, our competencies in capabilities and our capacities, because of our brand, because of where we're located? Because if we can find that sweet spot, our uniqueness, that's where we need to focus. That's where we'll make the biggest difference. That's where we'll find the alignment. Now, if we then take that right down to the teams, here are some questions we can ask at the team level. What's the big why of our team? What's the raison d'etre? What would be missing in the world if we stopped to exist? Who does your team create value for now and in the future? And what could we do to increase the shared value we create for each of our stakeholders and our stakeholders' stakeholders? And what do we need to be known for? So I was working recently with a sports coach who was one of my diploma trainings where we train systemic team coaches right around the world to work with teams. And he was working with a cricket team in India in the IPL, the 2020 big competition, where they had cricketers from all around the world coming together and coaches coming together. And the coach said, look, I come from one country, I've got people who are prima donna players, who are at the top of their game, but we've got to build some sense of real collective meaning. And so one of the questions we worked with that team was, what do you want to be remembered for? In 5 years' time, what do you want people to be saying about your team that made it stand out and made it make a unique contribution to the IPL and the world of cricket. And it was that gave the team a sense, because previously they'd been many star players, but they had not come together to be more than some of their parts. So if we then look at, it's no good just having lots of team purposes. Those team purposes need to be aligned to what is the purpose of the organization. A book I recommend is the book Team of Teams by General McChrystal, who was given the big challenge of being in charge of the Allied forces in Iraq post the war. And he woke up one night thinking, I've got the best equipped, best financed, best resourced, best trained forces ever assembled in the world. And yet we're being totally outmaneuvered by small cells of amateur terrorists. And what he realized is that he had great teamwork, but those teams were all very loyal and bonded as teams. But he needed to create a team of teams, where the relationships between the constituent teams were as strong as the relationships within those teams. And that's where a sense of the teams asking, what is it we need to achieve together that we cannot achieve apart, becomes really important. And how is that aligned to a galvanizing purpose and direction for the whole? So not only can teams be more than the sum of their parts, but the organization can be more than the sum of their teams. And then, as I said earlier, we need partnerships. When I did research on tomorrow's leadership, most CEOs said to me, in the next 5 years, we'll be employing far less people because of AI, roboticization, digitalization, outsourcing. But in that time, the number of stakeholders we will have to partner with will get bigger and greater. So increasingly, leadership is not about leading my team, my function, my organization. It's about how do I create partnership across the organization and beyond the organization's boundaries? How do I partner with our customers so that they are our unpaid sales force? How do I do R&D not in an internal function, but through partnerships with universities, through competitions, using, as one Chinese company described it to me, the spare cognitive capacity of the world? How do we get our R&D done by others in partnership? I've worked with pharmaceutical companies that are having a whole community of small startup companies being their R&D nursery for growing new ideas that they can then network and give routes to market to. So how do we build those business ecosystems, and how do we create them not through transactional relationships, but through collective purpose of discovering what we can do together we can't do apart? And that means we have to shift our language. We have to go from spending too much time in engagement events and informing and communicating to actually knowing how to orchestrate active participation and to move to partnering and a sense of co-ownership and co-discovery. Too many meetings, whether they're internal, in teams, between teams, or external in partnerships, are spent exchanging pre-cooked thoughts, not creating new thinking together in the service of a future challenge, a future need, a future purpose that we cannot achieve together and needs new thinking to come up in the spaces between us. And we need to educate all leaders to be able to spend more time at the bottom of that list rather than at the top. And that means we need to build in a constant learning cycle. In relation to your question earlier, Margaret, that came in, purpose is something that needs to not be changing every quarter, every year, but being evolved and developed through us learning, not just inside the organization, not just at the individual and the team level and the organizational level, but learning dynamically in relationship to the future and the world around us. One of my colleagues at Henley, Professor Andrew Kakabadze, He's done a lot of work to develop the sense of value in organizations in the future can be brought down to a formula. It's the quality of your strategy, what you can uniquely do that the world of tomorrow needs, plus the multiplication of your engagement and your alignment. And in research that's been done recently, the biggest weakness in most organizations isn't the quality of their strategy or even their separate engagement with their employees, their customers, their investors. It's that third element, alignment, and that's where purpose starts to drive a real difference. So let me, before we go to more questions, Margaret, just say a little bit about some of the groups. There are many groups now that of leading companies that are coming together to look at not only how we purpose-led as an individual organization, but how do we create networks of companies that are making a positive difference to the world. One of the best that I know and have done some work with, the B team, their mission to create business which is beyond business as usual, a world in which purpose of business is to become a driving force for social, environmental, and economic benefit. And you know, these aren't kind of soft, unsuccessful organizations. Richard Branson, Paul Pullman were founding members, Unilever and Virgin. More recent members, Oliver Bate from the Alliance Group, Andrew Liveris from the Dow Chemical Company, Arif Naqvi from the Abraj Investment Group. And these are some of the things that they've been working on, bringing CEOs who realize that they don't just want to have to be measured by what's their return on investment, by what's their EBITDA, but they want to be remembered for the difference they've made in the world as a company and in partnership with other companies. And if we look at their latest Declaration of Interdependence, I think it speaks to a lot of things I've been saying. We envision a global economy that uses business as a force for good, right? It's comprised of new types of corporations. They're purpose-driven, create benefit for all stakeholders, not just shareholders. Going back to the Michael Porter paper that I mentioned earlier. As B corporations and leaders of this emerging economy, we believe that we must be the change we seek in the world. Great quote from Gandhi, be the change you want to see. We have to model the future we want our children to live in. That all businesses ought to be conducted as if people in place mattered. Not just people, but place mattered. And not just human place, but the ecological place. That through their products, practices, and profits, businesses should aspire to do no harm and benefit all. And that all is beyond the human all. To do so requires that we act with the understanding that we are dependent upon another, on each other, and that thus responsible for each other and for future generations. Yesterday, I was working with an organization at Henley Business School, and we were working with a lot of their kind of leaders across divisions. And one of them, they're a consumer-focused organization that looks at best products in different worlds. And one of them left agreeing that he would always have a chair in his meeting rooms whenever he had a meeting. And like David Attenborough occupying the people's chair at the Global Environment Summit, he would have a chair for future generations in his meeting room and always ask one of his team members to occupy that so that they weren't just focused on the first horizon of how do we do better work today, but what do we need to do for the generations that come after us. This is where I think we need to be moving. And I hope I've at least inspired some of you to do some first steps in how you can help your own company or companies that you're consultant to put purpose at the heart of everything they do, not just something they visit once a year. So Margaret, with that impassioned plea, what other questions have come in or that you think are important?
Well, I mean, I think that you have answered them very, very well and fully. I think there's still a lot, there's a lot of interest in the whole idea of purpose and partnering, and it will take quite a radical shift in business culture and business consciousness. Anything else you'd like to add in terms of how we as consultants and coaches in the community of practitioners can spread this more widely or easily?
Well, for consultants and practitioners, my message would be, and this is what I spend a lot of my time when I'm training people on either the 3-day systemic team coaching certificate or the 1-year program, the diploma in systemic team coaching. What I'm trying to teach them is less about techniques. It's more about how do you think and be systemic. And to be systemic, we have to focus not on what's the issue, what's the problem that we're there to help them fix. We have to always think future back, outside in, from the whole to the parts. We need to start by saying, what is it? Not what are your issues and problems, but what is it that your stakeholders are asking you to step up to? What is it that the world of tomorrow is going to require different from you? And we need to work with that as the driving force, not Horizon 1 problem-centered thinking. And we need to have techniques where too many meetings in organizations are internals talking to internals. I'm constantly flabbergasted by how many, when I work with organizations and I ask them, how many hours do you spend on internal meetings? And some are spending 20 hours, 30 hours, 35 hours a week. And it's not just they're spending too much time on internal meetings, but they're allowing their internal meetings to be internal. And they're not bringing the voice of the future, the voice of the stakeholders, right into every single meeting room. And that's something, consultants could be doing as well. Not just having meetings about what projects we're doing with what clients. They could be also bringing the client's voice into their internal meetings, the future voice into their internal meetings. Because we need to shift that whole balance to be future focused and outside in focus, because without that, we will not be future fit.
Okay, well, thank you, Peter. Thank you very much for that inspirational talk, and absolutely crucial for what we're doing at the moment and how we're working. So thank you also to everybody who attended. Peter's contact details are on the slides. Apologies again for the issues with the technology. So yeah, you should be able to contact Peter. He will also be doing the blog posts. And again, I'd like to remind you the recording and the slides from today will be sent to the email address you provided when you registered. And that will take about 24 hours for that to be actioned. So we hope very much that you'll join us for the next webinar in the series of Secrets of Business Transformation with Peter, where he'll discuss how to develop your culture to deliver your strategy. And the registration for this is, your strategy and your purpose. Registration for this is available at the gpstrategies.com site. So thank you all very much, and look forward to being with you again at the next webinar.